got a lot of extra rooms in my house. He's like, you should come take one. And I'm like, oh, are you serious? And all of a sudden, 2 guys in suits just walk in, and they're like, hey, is Michael Giorgio here? And I'm like, yeah, hey, that's me. He said, we're with the FBI.
Now we need to make an apology video on the internet.
Yeah, we did. Sorry, everybody.
Yeah.
To think that he would show up on the internet. You guys are
To think that he would ever show himself
I
in
need to go
general.
home.
Like,
But we appreciate you coming out here.
Yeah.
This is our guest, Mike Giorgio. We're just going to jump into it. Podcast 20, episode 20.
Big 2-0.
This
whoever
is
thought that we would get here?
not me. It's the last one of the year. So we're going to end it on a good note, do the best we can. And it's just, Mike, it's great to have you here, buddy.
Yeah, I'm happy to be on here. I know you guys expressed interest to get me on. I've been following it since you guys started making videos, so it's great to finally be on.
Thank you.
When you came back from your trip, which we'll talk about later, I remember we were doing a kind of podcast, like the Clappin' Faffin' thing is kind of a joke. We talked about having you on for such a long time, and now we're actually doing. We have microphones, we have a Brian, we have a camera, so we're.
It's kind of funny that you mentioned Clappin' Faffin' because I remember when you guys followed me on Instagram, and I'm like, who the hell is this?
Yeah.
I'm like, what is Clappin' Faffin'? And like I saw that you guys like were either followed by it. So I'm like, okay, it's probably something to do with you guys, and like I figured it had something to do with the homeschool people, but I didn't know I couldn't tell what it was. I thought it was like a business or like a website.
So it was. Actually, you want to hear the story behind it? It's
Yeah,
pretty
because
funny.
it's like a mystery to me.
This is way back in the past now, like 2020, back in the COVID era of things. Mike and I used to be roommates in a apartment together, which you've been to. You've seen that.
Yeah,
And you were
I
there
was
and
there.
hung out with us a couple times. And one day, we were just really bored. And I remember Mike, we were always looking for different ways to make money. And Mike found this video on TikTok that was showing this guy who was just buying random domain names and then basically listing them on GoDaddy for much more expensive prices and stuff like that. We're like, whoa, that's kind of a smart idea. We should totally do that. So we went into this website. I think it was called namedropper.com. And the first website that we saw was faffin.com. And I remember looking at that, and I looked at Mike, and I was like, dude, this is the funniest thing that I've ever seen. Who would ever buy a website called faffin.com?
We would.
Please tell me you didn't spend very much money on it.
So this is the most beautiful thing about it. We spent $69 on faffin.com.
That is $68 too many.
it was a nice price though. It really was in
Yeah.
the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
And then we listed it on GoDaddy for like $1,400.
It never sold.
I was gonna say, I bet you there's probably not very much interest on that list.
No, well, because like Faffin means nothing. Like we Googled it, like there's just like nothing.
No
it's, like,
meaning.
It might be a British slang, but
Yeah, and it's too long to be like an acronym. So you can't even use it for that. I think there was one thing we were like, could be the Faffin. I can't remember what the acronym was that we came up with. It was like Friends, Akron, From,
something.
Fools.
And then
I don't even know.
all we got to was
That's
Clappin'
too hard.
Faffin, and
Yeah,
then just,
way too hard. Too many
yeah,
F's.
It really was.
F's in the chat.
But yeah, F's in the chat. Rip Clappin' Faffin. But I think it's funny coming full circle, like having this little podcast all hanging out, because when we talk about all the time. Chris called it out, but we moved to Ohio, both of us, and then you were the first family we met. It was just we both have all our Mike Giorgio stories. First asking like, all right, we're all homeschooled. Like, how corrupt are you? And we're like, what? Like we swear sometimes. Like, we're like, all right, cool, we're
Yeah,
friends.
I didn't know you were cool like that.
Yeah.
My bad. I shouldn't have misjudged you. Well, because my parents would put us in those situations. Like I did not consent to meeting you. I didn't consent to be your friend. It was kind of forced onto me. After I met you, I was glad that was forced onto me. But we didn't get to weigh in on what families we met because we were homeschooled. There was you guys know, there was a limit to the amount of people that you could really meet. So whenever our parents found another family that had kids our age, they just invited them over whenever they could. Yeah. So.
It was fun because that introduced me to Nora. That's how I met Nora.
Yeah.
Another guest that we've had.
Yeah, another guest we had jumped in that friend group, and it's just funny how things work like that. But one of the stories we first watched. I think you introduced me to anime too. Like I did.
I probably did.
Yeah, it was sort of like you watch anime. We're like, no, here, watch this. We're like, whoa, okay.
Yeah, I was in my anime era back then.
Anime era, and then your video games era, because one of the games you talked about was the game we were meant to talk about upstairs.
Well, that era hasn't ended yet.
Are you still in it?
But no, that game that you're talking about is Realm of the Mad God. Most people probably haven't heard of that. I think its active player base right now is maybe 40,000 people at most that play it like every month.
Yeah.
That's a decent like MMO population.
I mean, yeah, for a small community that I think it was like an indie game that won some kind of award way back in like 2010. That's how they got started, and they got bought by like a mid-sized company. So yeah, it's not that bad of a player base now, but it's not like a League of Legends or a Valorant or something.
it's one of those games where like it would be hard to get into now. You just kind of had to be back there in the era.
No, dude, yeah. Most of the player base is just people like me who come back to it every now and then, just trying to get some of that nostalgia, and then you get into it for like a month, and then you're just done again.
So take us into where this game has taken you, because you said something that was really funny upstairs. Like people have dedication to their craft.
All
you
right.
100% had your dedication to it.
So when I was like 15, I got my first job. It was like a warehouse job. I was making probably like $8 an hour or something.
Yeah.
Working 3 days a week during the school year, and then working full times in the summer. So for like a 15, 16-year-old, that was really good money. I didn't have anything to spend that on besides like fast food and then video games. So I was really into the game at the time, and it's very much so pay to win game, which is like the only way it survived is because there's whales that I guess I was a whale back then who would just dump thousands of dollars into the game for in-game benefits basically. So I was so obsessed with the game that I was so dedicated to becoming one of the top players, and to be a top player you really had to invest either a ton of time, which I didn't have because I was only allowed to play for like an hour to 2 hours a day maximum by my parents. I was limited on that. So the only other way I could do it was by dumping hundreds and hundreds of dollars into it and boosting up my account, my characters. So over the span of like 3 months, I just, I would make a $20 transaction one day, a $100 transaction the next day. You're not even thinking about it. Every time I get my paycheck, just be like, sweet, bunch of new money to dump in this game. I at the time didn't realize how much I was spending. I just, $100 here, $100 there. How bad could it be? Yeah. Until my dad called me in his office one day, and he had printouts of my bank statements.
Oh.
And he put them in front of me, and he goes, I want you to guess how much money you spent on Realm of the Mad God in the last 3 months alone. And I was like, yeah, I know it's way more than it should be, maybe like $2,000, $3,000 max. And I believe, the actual amount was around $7,000, $7,500, something like that in a 3 month span, which for someone who was making close to minimum wage, that was like about most of my earnings for those 3 months. So yeah, none of that money was saved. All of it was blown in the account, which by the way, if I log in today, I'm still like a top 400 player.
I mean,
So like at least it lasted a little bit. I can have that claim to fame.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then I would get back into it every so often and just like dump a couple $100 into it in the span of like a month, and then just stop playing it for like 6 months, and then get back into it and be like, get addicted again, spend like $500, and then quit again. So it's kind of just like an endless money pit that I get into, get out of, get into, get out of.
That's like Fortnite and V-Bucks, but V-Bucks
Well,
is a bit.
I haven't spent money on Fortnite in like 5 years probably.
Yeah.
I'm very. Now, unless it's that game, I literally do not spend any money on video games. I don't buy video games. I only play free-to-play games, and I don't really buy anything in the games.
Yeah, I accidentally got the Fortnite crew.
Oh,
You
caved.
Yeah,
The monthly.
Back in the day, like when you had a Fortnite crew, like you're playing the game, you're like, oh my gosh, that's a crew member, and that was the good players, and I was never a good player. So what I did, I bought it just to piss off Chris. It's just to be like I show up in the lobby in a Fortnite crew, and they're like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm a crew. I'm that good."
I've got the skin to prove it.
So
Totally forgot about it.
So basically, you got like a Twitter verified check mark.
Exactly. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, like I'm not a big account, but I got that blue check mark.
Yeah, exactly. Like, 100 followers. Bam.
What's
I'm
up?
famous now.
I show up in the top of the comments just to get on.
Yeah. and then I'm like, oh well. So I played it. We played heavily for a little while. Then I totally forgot about it and never canceled it. So I was just getting a ton of V-Bucks, but also spending like
Log on your account like a year later,
Yeah,
just have like $5,000 in V-Bucks.
And it's not that cheap either. It's like $11.99.
Isn't it like $12 a month?
Yeah, it's like
Yeah,
$12 a month.
it definitely adds up, especially if
Right.
you're not using it. I'm like, that's a Chipotle.
Yeah.
Like, what am I doing?
Right, like it's not expensive, but like, what is the money actually going to?
Yeah.
I mean, if
Like,
you forget about it for like a year, that's like what, $140 almost.
Yeah,
That's a lot of money.
100%.
Yeah.
Especially like when you're trying to save, buy a house, all that other stuff. It's not super feasible.
I definitely got kind of into that a little bit too. When I was, I used to play a game. Also, it was like an online game. It was called Grepolis, and I think I actually tried pulling you into this game when I was in France. If you remember, I was texting you because you could get like gold currency, which was the currency of the game if you invited people, and then depending on
For a
how long they
bonus.
played,
Yeah.
you'd get more gold and stuff like that. And so I tried playing a lot of different people, but it was the same thing where like it's one of those games where it's a pay to win game. And there are whales. Like, you don't understand. There are people that live in Arabia that have no job. They just have millions and millions of dollars because they are part of an oil family. And so all they do is play online video games, and this was the game that they played. So the only way that you could keep up with them is if you had the gold to spend to basically keep up with them. And, you know, it was a very predatory money system. Like, all the stuff that you could pay to get, like, boosts and stuff like that would be, like, 1,000 gold, right? But the cheapest pack of gold that you could buy was 2,000 gold, and that cost $40.
Oh.
And so, you know, there were a couple times where I was like, yeah, you know, I could probably pay $40 just to have, like, you know,
Just for the
2,000
one
gold.
time.
It gives me 2 boosts,
Yeah.
right? That lasts me for like a week. Like, okay, $40, like, that wasn't that bad. Like, I would pay that at a restaurant every week. Might as well do it again.
Yeah.
And it just keeps on building up, and then you realize, like, oh crap, I just lost $500. It's like, I need to stop.
It really adds up before you even think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Yeah.
it really does. Video games are really cool though, because like Fortnite really got us all together during COVID. So like me, Chris, JP played like every single day for hours a day, and that was really how the COVID really couldn't hang out and do anything. So it was really cool that way. And then like Among Us came out, and everyone played Among Us. And I know you have a really cool story.
Yeah,
with
Among Us is a little bit of a special game to me. I don't play it anymore. I think it's a kid's game now. But at one point in my life, I was terminally addicted to that game. I was the best Among Us player this side of the Mississippi, I'd wager. I had all the strats. I would sit at work just waiting to go home to play Fortnite. To play Among Us.
Among Us.
Because I was so good at it and I was so confident in my abilities. That it just gave me so much gratification. I was playing with, and I wasn't just playing with random lobbies. So I was on a Discord server, and it was a 18 plus Discord server. So you actually had to verify with an ID in order to get access to the server.
Yeah.
And this was so that we didn't want to play with kids.
Yeah.
Who wants to play games with a squeaker who's going to get upset, and cry after you kill him, and
Yeah.
he's just going to tell everybody who killed him.
Yeah.
Because you really rely on the honor system because you have to stay muted if you're dead.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
a lot of people would ruin it that way. So I was playing on there. I wasn't just playing with kids. I was playing with real adults. I got into a kind of like a clique on the Discord server. There's probably like 5,000 to 10,000 people on there. But I was one of the most active members there. And I got into a clique with people, would play with them every single night. We had like a group of like 20 to 25 people. So whoever's on at the time, we'd have a group of 10 at all times.
Mm-hmm.
And one of those people, her in-game name was Malfoy, like from Harry Potter, because she
Yeah.
was a big fan of Malfoy. And she kind of caught my interest, early on. We played a lot together, and at one point, I think we did like movie watch parties or something in the Discord server where people got on cam. And I was like, wow, this girl's kind of pretty cute. So I kind of started chatting up with her in the DMs, slid in a little bit, and asked her, I think, if she wanted to watch, the show that we first watched together was The Queen's Gambit, because I was really into chess at the time.
Uh-huh.
I was like a 1500 chess amateur, no big deal or anything.
Small flex.
That's actually
Yeah,
a
small
decent.
flex.
That's a decent rating.
Peak was 1700 on League Chess. But, anyways, so little side note there. So we watched The Queen's Gambit. We started DMing more and more, getting to know each other, playing more, and we kind of realized after like a few weeks or so that we both had grown fond of each other. And it was a lot of work for me because she really was not putting in any work. Like I would try to initiate conversation, and she'd be like, "Yeah, okay,
The worst.
sure." She really made me work for it. Like I'd be like, "Hey, do you want to watch a movie?" And she'd be like, "Okay," and I'd be like, "What do you want to watch?" And she'd be like, "I don't know," And it was just like, can you get I had to try so hard. And I wish I could I should probably delete the messages on Discord because we've gone back and looked at them and they're so cringe.
Yeah.
But anyway, after the first month or so, we kind of realized that we wanted to get to know each other a little bit better. And there is a phenomenon on Discord and the internet that I'm sure is becoming a lot more popular these days, called e-dating, where people enter into a romantic relationship all the way across the world from each other. And a lot of the times they actually have no intentions of really meeting each other. It's kind of like just two lonely people on the internet, go fond of each other and just want to have someone to talk to throughout the day. And I had, steered away from that on my few years on Discord. I'd seen a lot of people doing it. It didn't really end up well for like 99% of the people that I saw that were doing it. So I never really looked into that or tried to branch out with anybody on that until I met her. And I was like, hey, maybe this is something that, I should go, a little bit further into and maybe go out and meet her. And it just so happened that her dad got on camera one day while we were on call, and he told me, he's like, hey, he's like, you're the guy that's been talking to my daughter, stealing her attention for like the last month. And I'm like, yeah, that's me. And he's like, yeah, he's like, I've got a lot of extra rooms in my house. He's like, you should come take one. And I'm like, oh, are you serious? Like, are you for real? And he was like, yeah, and I didn't really think much of it. I was like, this guy's probably, full of it. There's no way he's just going to let some creep, that he doesn't know come all the way across the world and move in with him for a little bit. And she lives, she was from Indonesia. I don't think I mentioned yet. So
no, I was gonna say.
Almost as far as you could go from Ohio is Indonesia. I think the furthest place you could actually go is Australia, but Indonesia is the second.
Yeah.
So as far as I could go, just about. Well, a few weeks down the road, I was like, well, was your dad actually serious about that? Would I be able to come visit? Because I could pay for a plane ticket, but I don't want to have to pay for housing out there. And she said, yeah, he was completely dead serious. So I started looking, at my options, and I thought about it long and hard. And I'm like, this is a girl that I think is actually worth it. As cliche as it sounds, she's not like other girls.
Yeah.
I hadn't dated anyone. I hadn't committed to anyone in a long time, or really even had a serious relationship longer than like 6 months up to that point. So it was kind of a big step for me to actually commit to something, but when it was right, it's right. So I had to get a passport, because I never had a passport. I never left the country. And I applied for an expedited one because this was in the height of COVID. It was end of 2020, beginning of 2020. It was the end of 2020, beginning of 2021 that I was applying for the passport. And I applied for an expedited one because it was taking longer than expected to get passports because of COVID. Everything was shut down. You couldn't actually go in to get your interview, so things took a lot longer. So the expedited one, it was still like, I think 12 weeks it was going to take to get to me. So like almost 3 months. So I applied for that, and I applied for it, with the destination country of Indonesia. And that was that. So then about a few weeks down the line, I was at work at Cricket Wireless, and all of a sudden 2 guys in suits just walk in, and they're like, hey, is Michael Giorgio here? And I'm like, yeah, hey, that's me,
Yeah.
One of my customers refer you,
Yeah.
You're trying to get the hook up on like a new LG, what you looking for? I can get you a deal. And he's like, yeah, well, we're actually here to talk to you about your passport application. He said, we're with the FBI. And I said, oh, okay. And I said, how did you guys know that I work here? And they're like, well, we stopped at your parents' house because that's the address that you had listed on your passport application, and they said you were here at work, so we decided we'd stop in and give you a little visit. And I'm like, great.
Yeah.
Do you want to like step in the back or something?
Yeah.
So we stepped in the back, and they're like, yeah, so it is our job at the FBI to investigate passport applications that check a certain amount of red flags. And they say 1 red flag is not usually enough to get your passport flag. You usually need at least 2 or 3, possibly more, depending on the severity of the flags, to really get somebody to come out and actually have to investigate this. And they made it very clear from the upfront they weren't trying to get me in trouble. They weren't trying to stop my passport or anything. They said that their job was to clear up any suspicion and get my passport through. So I'm like, okay, they're on my side, but when a Fed tells you they're on their side, are they really on your side? So they explained to me that the red flags that triggered on my passport were that I applied for an expedited passport, and then I applied for a passport to Indonesia, which they said was a country of interest at the time, which I didn't, I thought was kind of weird. And then they said that the third flag was that I listed that I only had 1 phone on my passport application. This was the biggest flag. And it showed that I had 3 phones. Now, this was because about 2 months earlier, we had a promo going on at Cricket. And I don't know if I could get in trouble for this, but it was like an ID verification thing where we were selling like iPhone, I don't know, 8s or 9s or something for $50 if you switched over. But you had to have an ID, and we had to run it through our system to basically, make sure that you hadn't already gotten one of these promos. So somebody came in, and the limit per person is 2. And for some reason, their ID wasn't working. It wasn't saying that like they had already got the promo. It was just like it wasn't recognizing it. So I went ahead and put the phones in my name just to get the close because I'm incentivized to get the sale to get the commission on the activation. So I put it in under my name, not thinking that this would actually show up in like a database because I didn't know what I was entering in or this customer's profile actually gets reported.
Yeah.
So they were I think it was like iPhone 11s. There were 2 brand new iPhone 11s, in the box, and I sold them to the guy. And he never changed the name on his account. So those showed up in my account. They're like, so you got 2 brand new iPhones. You're asking for an expedited passport, and it's to a country of interest, Indonesia. They're like, and at the same time, we looked up the call records on those phones, and they were all to people like named Muhammad, Abdullah, Yusuf, and it was because the guy I sold them to was an Arab guy. Yeah. So of course that makes sense.
Yeah.
But that, with all the other things, going to a Muslim country and, during the height of COVID, and I think ISIS was still a little bit active during the time, and they just wanted to check on that, all those things combined. To basically make sure that I was not being coerced by a terrorist group to go to the country and bring, some kind of thing. So in order to get my passport, basically cleared, they said that I had to get a hold of the guy who bought the phones and get him to actually call the FBI agent and tell him to corroborate my story.
Yeah.
So it took me several weeks to track down the guy, and he was super suspicious, super skittish, because he was thought that they were trying to investigate him.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what he had going on. I wasn't trying to get him in trouble. One of my friends who was close with him actually reached out to him and was like, "Hey, we really need you to do this. It's literally just going to clear this guy's name. They have no interest with you." So he actually called the FBI guy, told him, what was going on. I got a text the next day from the FBI agent saying, "Hey, we got a call from, I think his name was Hamza. He said, we cleared everything up. He said, your passport's going to be good to go. You should get it in the mail in a few weeks." So, it just a little bit of, I wasn't ever expecting to have a couple FBI agents showing up at my work, in the middle of the day. But they did. And they were just there to help me. They actually did help me out. And it was funny. There was even some things back then. I used to send stuff on Cash App or Zelle to certain individuals for certain things, like any good chap would, that we won't name. And they, brought those up to me. And one of them happened to be named Muhammad. And they're like, "What is this $200 you're sending to Muhammad?" And I'm like, "That is a good friend of mine who supplies something for me." And he's like, "Okay, I'm not interested in that." He said, "I'm just interested in, clearing your, your name and all this stuff." He's like, "We don't really care about that."
Yeah. Good for you.
But yeah, so I basically did admit to certain things that I probably shouldn't have to them because they're feds, but they totally said they didn't care.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and I got my passport and I got to fly out to Indonesia in May of 2021. I was supposed to fly out in March, but because my passport got delayed, I wasn't able to fly out actually until May. And another thing about getting to Indonesia in the height of COVID is they had one of the strictest lockdowns in the world, especially for people coming into their country. So I had to get a type of visa. It was a work visa for, I think, some kind of marine company. They were saying that I was a technical consultant. I am not a technical consultant, but we paid a couple grand and got into the country. That's one of the beauties about the country of Indonesia is that some things you could get away with a little bit of moolah.
Yeah.
You just got to throw a little money this way, throw a little money that way. And, they let you in.
Yeah.
So I got there in May of 2021. I had a return ticket for, I think it was June 26th. So I was only supposed to be there for about a month and a half. When I got there, I had to spend a 5-day quarantine in a hotel. And I did not know that you were supposed to pre-book the hotel if you wanted to not get ripped off. So I got out of the plane and, I'm walking out to the front to the taxis and all this stuff. And I'm like, "Hey, I need to quarantine." And they had people set up to basically get you signed up for a quarantine approved hotel. So I asked the lady, I'm like, "What hotels do you have available?" She's like, "Oh, I have the, I think it was the Mandarin Oriental, which is a 5-star, hotel. And then I have the Holiday Inn." And I'm like, "Oh, I'll take the Holiday Inn, please."
Yeah.
And she goes back and she comes back to me and she's like, hey, actually the Holiday Inn's all booked. We can only get you in at the Mandarin Oriental. And I'm like, okay, sure. I ended up spending $1,200 for a 5-night stay. Now, I stayed in a nice room. I got 3 meals a day, you know, and I got a little bit extra room service here and there, like, because the food was, I didn't really get that, like, it wasn't enough food in what they gave me, because the portions are smaller over there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I spent like $1,200 there, and then I got picked up by Malfoy, her real name is Zeta, and her brother picked me up, and then I went off to her mom's house. And needless to say, I did not go back on June 26th. I canceled my return flight. I actually ended up staying for about 11 months, and we got married about 7 months into it.
That's just so good.
Yeah,
I love that.
and then I came back in 2022, I believe February, brought her here on a visa in June of 2022. And she's been here ever since, and we had our daughter in July of this year.
That's honestly one of the best stories I've like ever heard in my entire life. I love that so. It's just so crazy because when you tell them this, I remember because like we would hang out every once in a while, but then like guys like we won't talk for like a couple months.
Yeah.
And then it would just be like, hey, do you hear what Mike Giorgio's doing? Or like what's he doing? He's going to Indonesia. To meet a girl he met online. We're like, wait,
Yeah.
what? Mike's gonna die.
You sound like my dad.
Yeah.
That's what we all thought. Like,
We all thought you got kidnapped. You're like, because I had just came back from school in France, and like, you know, COVID was crazy, and
Yeah.
like, there's all the craziness of lockdowns and everything like that. Like, no one's seeing anyone, and all of a sudden, like, just on top of it all, like the cherry on top of it all was like, hey, did you guys hear Mike Giorgio's going to Indonesia? And then like a month later, the news came out. It was like, yeah, it was for this girl that he met on Discord. And we're like, wow.
Yeah.
Like, that was like, it was the craziest thing. But the thing that's so beautiful about it all is like, you know, that's your wife. You met
Yeah.
your wife, and you guys have a daughter now.
Yeah.
Like, it's one of the most beautiful things. And it's like, it's only something that could happen in today's world, right?
Yeah.
Like, only today's world, like the modern world. Like, you met this girl playing Among Us, essentially. And
Yeah.
now you guys are married and you have a kid.
And I'd like to say we're happily married, at least from my side. I think for her, I think she's happy, but you know, I can't read a woman's mind. So
no man can, and no man ever will. But yeah, that it's like the most modern, the best modern day love story there really is. Like it's it doesn't get better than that. It's still to this day, it still blows my mind. And like when we found out you were getting married there, we were like, whoa. And then we saw the pictures that you posting on Instagram. We're like, is he in a castle? Like what is going on? Like we'll see if we'll post them on our story on Instagram. Like it was insane.
you guys really were hyping me up. I remember that.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
I got so many like of you guys cross posting me and like Chris and you guys and
Yep.
I really felt the support all over there. You know, especially because it was like a very knee jerk decision to just fly away. You know, I just quit my job and left the country.
Yeah.
And I had a return ticket, but I didn't really ever plan on coming back that quick. You know, and it's funny that you mentioned that you're like, oh, he's gonna die. My dad was like looking up Indonesia and like terrorism in Indonesia and the Indonesian government and like locals getting arrested and you know this or like foreigners getting arrested and this kind of thing. He's like, you better like look through your phone, you know, make sure you don't have anything on there that like they wouldn't like. You know, he's like, you should go through your pictures and all this. He's like, because when you get off the plane and go through the customs, whatever, he's like, they're gonna search all your stuff. You better make sure you don't have anything in there. And let's just say they didn't search anything. They gave me a form when I landed and it was like, please say yes or no if you have these illegal items. And what I just put no, and I just handed it to them. They're like, okay, welcome to Indonesia.
Yeah, it's like I'm here.
the
And I'm like, oh,
Imagine
you
that
don't.
line.
I was like, oh, you don't want this? I'm like you know, here's my phone.
Yeah, it's
Here's
like, here-
everything.
It's open. Like,
It's like, oh, take off all my clothes. You can see.
Yeah. You gonna do a cavity search? I brought the.
yeah, we're ready.
You know,
Oh
I came
my
prepared. Like
Yeah.
I saw what you guys do online. I thought this is what we're gonna do.
Yeah. I remember, I think it was really cool for us over here just to kind of experience and watch it because, you know, we were all friends in high school and we had like our, you know, our guy group of friends here and stuff. And I think it was just crazy for us to see, like, one, Mike Giorgio went all the way over to Indonesia. Two, he got married before everyone else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just three, like his wife was actually very, very attractive and like not the type of person that you thought Mike Giorgio would have married.
Whoa!
No, just kidding.
What are you trying to say about me?
Dude, I thought you were getting catfished. I thought you were gonna die.
Yes.
Like, I mean, because
Yeah.
you said you're meeting a girl on the internet
From Discord.
Yeah, from
Yeah.
Discord, from Among Us.
Yeah.
And then when you first came back and we hung out in the apartment, you telling us the story, our minds were just
Blown.
blown.
Yeah.
Even hearing it again, it just makes
Yeah.
zero sense. Like it's so cool.
It is the greatest story.
It's
of
that
all
is
time.
one story that I always
Yeah.
have in my back pocket that like I can just pull out whenever I need to.
Mhm.
You know, like I'm just bored somewhere with a bunch of group of people I don't know. Like, hey, you guys want to hear a crazy story?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, they're like, yeah, sure.
just
It's
whip
like-
it out.
Yeah.
We had a guy in the podcast somewhere recently, and we were just talking about like traveling and stuff like that. And he was talking about how he met this one guy on like or no, I think it was you who brought the story of like there's an old guy that you met who, he just used to go scuba diving
In the Philippines.
in the Philippines
Yeah.
all the time, like every year and stuff
Yeah.
like that. And like it was just a random old guy in Montrose. And like that's gonna be you someday. Like you're just gonna be that old random guy in Ohio who's like, let me tell you a story, kids.
I'm
Like,
gonna-
I
I'm
went to
gonna-
Indonesia.
I'm gonna have that story that like that a guy comes up to you on the street and asks you for money and you say you don't have it and he gives you some crazy story about like I remember a guy that I met at a CVS who told me that he was like a huge rap producer back in the day and that like he something about some kind of rap industry basically stole his career away from him, right? And I'm just sitting over here like, yeah, I mean, I don't know if I believe that.
Yeah.
And like I obviously acted like I believed it in front of him, but I feel like that's gonna be me. I'm gonna be like telling people about this story, and they're gonna be like, "There's no way this dude did that." Like back in 2021, like okay, maybe now in 2060, where
Yeah.
we're dating people on VR, but back in 2021 when y'all only had iPhones and you didn't have IVR, like come
Yeah.
on, no way. When
Yeah.
you couldn't put a chip in your brain and completely like disassociate with reality. No, that couldn't have worked.
That's the coolest thing though. But yeah, about
They're
it.
gonna be like, "Oh, so you mean you got a mail order bride?"
Yeah.
But you
They're
didn't,
like, that's a crazy way to say
Yeah.
you purchased your wife online.
Yeah.
dude. That's coming soon. No, dude,
It's coming soon. What do you mean? It's already a thing.
is it actually?
Mail order brides?
No way.
Probably.
Oh, yeah,
Not
100%.
legally.
Okay, but I
I
mean,
mean,
I,
definitely not legal.
Well, I mean,
May-
there's definitely like green card wives.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's
Well,
like
that,
the
yeah,
same,
that's
like,
true.
you
But
gotta,
I mean,
like-
you have the ultimate like extraordinary story to tell. Like you have like you automatically have like the one up on every single person. Like oh, like that's how you met your wife. Like let me tell you how I met my
Yeah,
wife.
I have that love story.
Yeah,
know?
you do. You actually do, dude. They could make a Hallmark movie out of like your
And
whole
it's
story.
crazy because I was part of Discord communities, and I don't want to spill too much about my past, but I was part of Discord communities that were basically surrounded around e-dating and that kind of thing. And I had seen it fail so many times, and I've been in some situations where like I had the kind of opportunity to do that, and I was like, yeah, no, I'm never gonna do this. So for like me to change my mind on that, it was a really big decision for me, but again, it was worth it, and it definitely paid off.
It definitely did, and having to tell the story to people now, you can just show them this podcast.
Yeah.
Like, it's like you get sick of the story, like, you know what? Here, just watch this.
Low-key,
but-
low-key a plug.
Yeah.
The only downside is I think that like I can't trump that, like that was one of the most wild and I feel like daring things that I've ever done. I could have been killed. Like I didn't know,
Yes.
really what I was getting myself into at the time. And I remember like when I first got on the plane and I'm like, dang, like this is real. I'm like, I'm really doing this. And I'm like, I'm kind of fearless, this is
Yeah.
pretty sick. And just that rush of adrenaline that I got,
Yeah.
that, I'm really branching into something new and getting out of my comfort zone. It's not something that you do very often. And I feel like I'm not going to get that opportunity to do something that just pushes me so far out of my comfort zone again. Because I would need something like my wife that makes it that much worth it that I have to push myself out of it,
Yeah, 100%.
Dude,
And-
I'm sorry.
no, go ahead.
I was just gonna say now you
I
have a
was weird.
reason to go to Indonesia all the
Oh
time.
yeah,
You've
Dude,
got family there.
Indonesia is also great, by the way. I didn't really talk much about it, but the people there are super nice. Most of them don't really speak English, but all you're really gonna see from them is a smile, and they're just gonna say like, "Oh, hello," hello, like nice to meet you, like and try to talk a little bit to you. But yeah, just really great people, great food, and I think definitely an underrated country out there, and no terrorism that I saw. It was pretty safe. I've seen more people get beat up and shot here in like a week than I did in my entire 10 months there, and I don't even live in like that dangerous of an area.
No, yeah. Dude,
Right.
hey, maybe podcast 100 will go down to.
Yeah, that'd be pretty sick.
That'd be insane. This was fantastic. I love this story. I can't wait to rewatch this.
Me
editing.
too.
Like, I'm gonna watch it so many times. But it's been fantastic. We'll definitely get you on again. There's so
Yeah.
much more to Mike Giorgio
Mm-hmm.
that we can't really fit into like just 30 minutes to 40
No,
minutes.
I mean that 30 minutes went by so fast.
Oh, it did. Yeah.
It was the quickest
honestly,
podcast.
when I thought it was gonna be an hour, and I'm like, man, I don't know how I'm gonna talk for an hour. And I feel like I just talked for like 5 minutes. It was 30 minutes.
Yeah, it was insane. But
So
yeah,
one
you
more
close
thing.
it out,
I
yeah.
was just gonna say, one thing that we're trying to do more is like have each of our guests just say something to the audience at the end. So like if there's like a call to action, anything that like you really want to leave with the audience, somewhere like a resource you want to point out to them, anything like just go ahead and shout it out to them.
No, I mean it's kind of corny, but don't be afraid to go into uncharted waters, and don't let people scare you from making a jump that you should make. Because I had a lot of people telling me that I shouldn't do this, it was scary, that it was dangerous, that I was risking my life, that I was wasting my time, and look where I'm at now. So don't let anybody basically make you tell yourself no.
And that's how we're ending the last podcast of the year, podcast 20. Happy New Year, Mike Giorgio. Thank you so much. This has been fantastic.
Morris, Illinois, 844.
Signing
Signing out.